calling the February 25th Board of Education meeting to order. I'm assuming everybody's reviewed the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Thanks, Glenn. Second.
Second.
Thanks, Ruth. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Public comments. And this is the intro I always try to remember to give, is that each comment is limited to around 2 minutes, and the board does not respond directly, but we will follow up if appropriate after the meeting. And please be assured that when you contact the Board of Ed, whether you want it to be public comment or not, each board member reads each letter it receives. Okay, so with that, Lucille, do we have public comment?
Yes, we do. We have 4.
Okay.
The first comment is from Diane Kusko. I don't believe she put her address on here. To all, I am imploring that you open up our schools for full-time in-school learning for those that want and need it. I have no skin in this game anymore. My children are all WHS graduates. However, I am worried about Wilton's current students. On February 4th, my nephew Kevin committed suicide. He was a junior at Ward High School in Fairfield and had just celebrated his 17th birthday a few weeks before. He was a ray of sunshine, a good friend, and a bright student that thrived on in-class discussions. He enjoyed being part of a team and played football and lacrosse. He also loved his job lifeguarding at the Westport YMCA. Kevin suffered from depression and was being treated. However, it was exacerbated by being isolated due to remote learning. The attached links are from reports on News Channel 8 and News Channel 12 and are of Kevin's parents speaking out about Kevin's death, his depression, and the effect they believe remote learning had on his decision to take his life. They are speaking out in Kevin's memory and hoping to get students back in school, activities, running, and to prevent any child from taking their own life. Wilton already had 1 suicide this school year. I do not know if remote learning played a part in this student's death. However, I'd be willing to bet it did. How many more attempts will it take before we realize that this pandemic and remote learning is literally killing our kids? The suicide attempt rate is up almost 20%. 1 out of every 2 students suffers from anxiety and/or depression as a direct result of remote learning. This is a time when adolescents should be spreading their wings and gaining independence. Instead, they are forced to remain home with limited interactions, minimal, if any, sports or activities, and reliance on social media, which is also detrimental to their mental health. I understand the concerns of illness related to COVID, but the lockdowns were never intended to keep people from getting sick. The virus has a 99% recovery rate. Suicide has no recovery rate. A 20% in suicide attempts is a lot scarier to me and a lot less safe than a virus that is 99% recoverable. If schools in surrounding towns, Darien, Greenwich, New Canaan, etc., can open up, why can't we? Fairfield is going back full-time and all in March 8th and 9th. Too late for Kevin. Please don't let Wilton make the same mistake. Please open up our schools. And she includes a bunch of links. I sent this to the board. I sent the email to the board. The next one is from Nadia Murphy, 106 Spectacle Lane, Wilton. I am writing, dear Wilton Board of Education, I am writing to express my strong support for full 5-day in-person learning in all of the Wilton public schools in accordance with CDC guidelines. The bottom line is that the CDC states that it is critical for schools to open as safely and as quickly as possible for in-person learning. Schools play an important role in children's educational achievement, health, and well-being. Wilton is following all of the suggested guidelines in the current CDC checklist for in-person schooling. The CDC checklist states clearly that if yes is selected for most items, you may want to consider in-person learning for your child. I would like full in-person learning, but Wilton Public Schools are not providing us with that option. I urge the board and others at this hearing to complete the CDC checklist themselves. The link is below. Why would they answer no to any of the questions? Nearby school districts, including Richfield, also have the best interests of students in mind and now allow students to return to in-person 5-day-a-week schooling. It remains unclear to me why younger students in Wilton are in school 4 days a week as opposed to 5, and why high school students are only in person 2 days a week. What are the public health and scientific reasons for these differences? For the well-being of our students, Wilton needs to open our schools for 5-day-a-week in-person learning. And again, the person includes a link. The next one is from Kara O'Neill, 48 Erdman Lane. Many local high schools have brought back students or are bringing them back full-time soon. Why is Wilton still not having children in the buildings on Wednesdays with the new plan? These kids have missed so much school. Wednesday should no longer be remote half days. Wednesday should be utilized properly as part of the new 75% plan to add another in-school day to the rotation, upping each child's time to 7 out of 10 days instead of 6 out of 10. There is a lot of evidence that COVID is an airborne illness that does not spread on surfaces. Deep cleaning is not necessary. No other schools in this area close down for a full day each week to deep clean. Please consider using Wednesdays as real school days for the remainder of the year. Kara O'Neill. And the next comment was actually sent to us on Monday, February 15th, but she did mark it public comment, so I'm reading it. It's from Martha Phelan. It is from Martha Phelan, 13 Fox Run, Wilton, Connecticut. I am writing regarding in-person learning for Wilton students. I applaud the efforts of everyone working in our district, who I know have the best interest of our students in mind as we navigate this challenging year. I am encouraged by the increase of in-person days implemented at Middlebrook School and the survey to consider increased days for Wilton High School. I work as a high school teacher in a district that borders our town and see firsthand the benefit of in-person learning both from an educational value as well as a social emotional value. However, I do have concerns for our students in Wilton following the district's current protocols on quarantining in comparison to current CDC, DPH, and CSD guidelines, and limiting learning to a 4-day in-person week. Firstly, I believe we should reevaluate the district's quarantine protocols based on the most current information available from the CDC and DPH and the low possibility of transmission at school due to the many mitigation efforts being used. Quarantining a student for 14 days, requiring that child to isolate from family members while staying home takes a huge toll on their social, emotional well-being. Additionally, just the constant thought that this may occur at any time weighs heavily on each child. The January 28th report showing the widespread quarantine of cohorts at Middlebrook of 95 students and 25 staff with 2 positive cases due to the explanation that it could not be determined which students did or did not come in close contact was very confusing. Why was contact tracing not possible if we have multiple layers of mitigation efforts in place? If there was one part of the school day that caused this widespread quarantine, has it been modified so that it does not occur again? Other districts in Fairfield County are currently adapting quarantine protocols to maximize the learning experience for students using 10 days rather than 14 days, and a true 6 feet measurement for at least 15 minutes rather than just whole cohorts, classrooms, or buses. Secondly, I believe we should continue to strive for 5 days of full day in-person learning. Considering the current high school proposal as a 75% model immediately dismisses Wednesday as a day of in-person learning. Basing the proposal on a traditional 5-day school week, The current proposal is 60% of in-person learning. At this time, if Wednesday is not used for deep cleaning up the school building or a separation day for cohorts for all schools in the district, when will the district consider returning Wednesday as a full in-person day of learning? Thank you for supporting our children, Martha Phelan. And that's it.
Okay, thank you for reading those, Lucille, and thank you to all the writers who sent those in. I hope everyone's aware that the high school learning model is an item on the agenda for tonight, which we'll get to some of the specifics that people brought up, if not, although maybe not all of them. But we thank everyone for their concerns. Okay, the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
So moved.
Thanks, Mandy. Is there second?
Second.
Thanks. Everyone in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. All right, that brings us to reports. Board Chair's report. I do not have a report tonight, other than to say this is the beginning of our budget process. And so I encourage the public and parents and the entire community to be as involved as possible. So, thank you. Superintendent's report.
Great. I do not have a report either tonight. You're going to hear plenty from me when we get into the proposed budget. I will share with the board, although as proposed action, we're going to hear the high school plan tonight. The board should know we are working on a plan on Wednesdays, and we'll be coming forward in a subsequent meeting with more information about a plan for Wednesdays.
Okay, thank you for that. That brings us to, oh my gosh, my agenda cut off, but I am pretty sure it's the budget presentation.
We have there were no, I don't know that.
I know, I'm sorry, committee reports. I'm not sure any committees met, or did you? I'm sorry.
We did. Teaching. and learning.
Okay, Jen, sorry about that. Go ahead.
That's okay. My connection says it's unstable. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. We talked about 3 different things. The first was algebra in freshman year at the high school. It's going to be a 6141 that'll be presented at a board meeting at some point. Their district has identified a need to split Algebra 1 into 2 years at the high school level. They decided that rather than pulling students out of class, they would split the class and allow students to have 2 years of Algebra 1 so that they were ready for Algebra 2 their junior year. And I guess that continuing this offering would be dictated based on student needs, but it's projected to be beneficial for the next few years. And then we had an update on the supplemental instruction in math, the new program. That began
Jen, I'm sorry, Jen, you're sort of breaking up.
The program was originally designed for approximately 150 students. And right now,
Okay, you're kind of breaking up, Jen. I'm sorry about that.
Andy, you want to talk?
Sorry, we had an update on the.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead, Jen. You have the better note.
I'm sorry about that.
Jen.
It's still not, Jen, you're frozen for,
Yeah, Debbie, why don't we'll get.
okay, so we'll come back to that at a later meeting or a later
Am I on
time.
now? You can hear me again?
Why don't we just come back to you later, if you don't mind?
Mandy, you
Okay.
need to talk.
Yeah, we'll come back to Jen. And business ops did not meet, did
Okay,
policy
sorry.
meet? Okay, all right.
It doesn't matter. Yeah.
All right, so Kevin, again, I printed the agenda, but it's missing a whole section. So I'm assuming that the budget presentation is next.
But we're just going to delay that a little bit longer and give you a 2-minute update on our progress setting up surveillance testing.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Ray, do you want to just take us through it real quickly?
Sure. Good evening. So we have a plan before the health director currently for his approval on surveillance testing. It's a plan for a 4-week phase-in to begin with one school and add one school each additional week. It will be a voluntary testing where we will invite students and staff from across the community across the school community, I should say, to participate in the testing that we're going to have through Miramis Labs. We will allow up to 5% of students and staff at each building. And the way that it will work is that people will volunteer through an online form. We will notify them within 24 hours if they've been included in that 5%. Students and staff, students K through 5 and all staff will then receive a test kit to take home. And the morning that they're supposed to bring the test kit back to school, they will produce a sample, saliva test. They will produce a sample at home and return it to school. We'll have bins likely at the nurse's office for collection. And for our middle school and high school students, they will actually receive an appointment time on the day that the tests are supposed to be submitted, and they will actually produce the sample on site. That was a recommendation that we received from Miramis Labs to have that age group actually produce the sample on site. So our plan is to have not the same 5% participate 2 weeks in a row, so that over the course of a month, we will have approximately 10 to 20% of our school community tested. And the samples are shipped overnight, and typically we receive the results within 24 to 48 hours. This is a process that isn't widely used, I think, because it's so new and school districts are just beginning to learn about it. It has been used in certain school districts. In Westchester, we know of at least one in Byram Hills that's using it. It's a strategy that we believe, combined with all of the other strategies we have in place, will help to identify asymptomatic positive individuals, will help develop a level of comfort, continued comfort in students and staff on campus. And, we're cautiously optimistic that this is something we're going to be able to put in place in the next few weeks. So right now we have our contracts and the consent forms in front of our attorneys for approval. And as I said, we are working with the health director just to finalize the plan.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments?
I just wanted to say that I think that it's great. So I'm really pleased that we're moving forward with this, especially as we open up the schools further, having another mitigation strategy as, cohorting kind of dwindles a bit is great to have. I was just curious if the tool allows for identification if there is a positive within the pool to then narrow down within and isolate the potential positive candidate.
Absolutely. So the way that it works is, the premise of it is that we know most samples are going to be negative. So they take 24 samples and pool them together. And typically those samples are all negative. So you're paying for one test rather than 24. And then if they find that there's something within that pool of samples that's positive, then they retest all of the samples. And so they're able to get down to the level of the person, the individual that is actually positive, and we're able to communicate that information. So, there is information that's really actionable in the moment for us to quarantine people that need to be quarantined and isolate those that need to be isolated.
Great, thank you.
Maria, has been the experience of the Westchester districts in terms of either positivity rates or the need to, how many of their population did they get to in terms of surveillance testing and the volunteer idea?
Well,
Was there more demand than supply?
I know Kevin's been in contact with them, so Kevin may have a little bit more information about that.
Yeah, I spoke a few weeks ago with the superintendent over in Byram Hills, and they were trying to test about 20% of their population per month, and they were, getting about the 14, 15% range. And at the time that we had spoken, they had only had 4 positive cases come back for, I think they've been doing for at least a month or more. So it's been a pretty low number for them. There's no issue in terms of demand, and I think they were still, even after a month or so, refining the process.
Okay, thank you. And Maria, did you talk about the cost?
Yes, Kevin has been working on the cost with Miramis Labs directly, so I'll defer to Kevin on that as well.
Yeah, it's comparable to what we had discussed when we were looking at CIC Health. So tests are about $13, $14 per person per pool, and then there's the kind of the related charges. So shipping, and we would expect to provide a stipend or a small salary to have an individual manage the process. So what we're estimating, we think we're going to start, relatively small. So, maybe 10 pools per week to begin. So that's about 240 tests. We're estimating, somewhere, $30,000, $40,000 over the course of 10 weeks for tests, and then maybe another, 15 or 20 to pay somebody to manage that for us. That salary piece is very rough because we're just kind of beginning to sort out what we need and who needs to do it and for how many hours and so on. So that number needs to be refined.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the budget presentation.
Right.
So
Big
thank
deal.
you in advance, Kevin. I know how hard you and your staff have been working on this.
Yeah, thanks. Give me 1 second here. I'm just going to share my screen. I'll find you all again. Great. And great. Okay, so hopefully you can all see my screen, and you should be looking at the cover slide for the 2021-2022 Superintendent's Budget Proposal. So on that, on behalf of the Wilton Public Schools Administration, I'm pleased tonight to present our proposed operating budget for the 21-22 school year. As we think about next year, we will continue to respond to the pandemic. We believe we'll be in a recovery mode, and we'll also be experiencing opportunities like we are currently to reimagine how we do business to better serve our students and our families. This school year has been one like none other, and I'm immensely proud that our community has met the challenges presented by the COVID-19 pandemic. In July 2020, it was a question whether we would actually be able to welcome students to school in person. As of today, the majority of our students are attending school in person 4 days a week, and plans are in place to increase that number further, some of which you're going to hear about shortly. As I think back on the intense planning that was underway in July and August, I know that the reopening question for us quickly evolved from if to how. Since early September, when we first welcomed students back into our schools, the question again evolved from how to how better. In the midst of so much uncertainty, what is and has remained certain is our collective commitment to delivering on our promises and providing a world-class education to our students and families. Our teachers show up to school every day thinking about how they can continue to make teaching and learning more impactful for students who are at home and for those who are here with us in person. So as the African proverb goes, it truly does take a village to raise a child. The Wilton community has come together in profound ways to support our efforts at providing education to our students. And I'm truly grateful to all of you on our board for providing such strong and clear leadership. And I'm grateful to all of our community partners for working alongside us and supporting our students and families in so many different ways. During this unprecedented time, we do remain focused on our core mission and vision to inspire and prepare students to contribute to a globally interdependent society by providing a rigorous learner-centered curriculum. As you'll see when we dive more deeply into the budget, our spending proposal prioritizes staffing and programs that support our vision and mission. We take our values and promises seriously, and they live at the heart of our work and our decision-making. Scholarship tops the list of our values, and we've had a very strong track record of continuous academic improvement, as well as a long list of tremendous examples of student success. To summarize briefly, I'll begin with some student learning data. This graph highlights achievement in English language arts and mathematics for all students in grades 3 through 8 on the most recent administration of the Smarter Balanced Assessment, which occurred in 2019. I would note here, in both ELA and math, the majority of our students meet and exceed grade level expectations, as you can see is highlighted in blue and then green. When we dig deeper into the data, we look first at math achievement, and this graph demonstrates aggregate achievement levels in grades 3 through 8 on the Smarter Balanced over the last 5 years. It also disaggregates for students who receive special education services. I would highlight first the trend over time. If you look at the set of bars on the upper half, you'll note the very strong achievement of our students. Over time, more students are achieving in the exceeds grade level expectations band, and fewer are in the below grade level expectations band. For our students with disabilities, there is clearly an achievement gap that we are actively addressing, but the trend here is also moving in the right direction. Our goal is to move many more of these students to grade level performance on the Smarter Balanced Assessment. Like the previous slide, this slide highlights ELA achievement in grades 3 through 8 and also disaggregates for our special ed students. And I would just share with you, you can see the trend and the pattern is the same. We have more students moving into that exceeds expectations band in both our general ed population as well as our special ed population. But the gap there persists as well. On the most recent assessment, the most recent administration of the Connecticut School Day SAT, which is the state accountability test for grade 11, you will also note very strong academic achievement. Half of our students exceeded grade level standards on the ELA portion of the exam. While mathematics achievements lags ELA achievement, which is also a national trend, our high school does continue to post some of the highest scores in the state of Connecticut. Even in the midst of a global pandemic, the Wilton Public Schools and our Wilton students excel. For the last 2 years, Wilton High School has been recognized with the Great Schools College Success Award. Our system has been awarded the NAM Foundation's Best Community for Music Education designation. In 2020, Middlebrook was recognized as a U.S. Department of Education Green Ribbon School, and niche.com named Wilton Public Schools as the 4th best in the state for 2021. We continue to rank among the top 1% of all high schools in our country. 9 students in the class of 2021 have been recognized as National Merit Scholar semifinalists. Our SAT scores in both language arts and mathematics remain among the highest in the state. The mean ACT score for the class of 2020 was 28, compared to the national mean of 20.7. 92% of our AP students scored a 3 or better on their advanced placement exams, and 135 students were recognized as AP scholars. Our AP performance is exceptionally strong, and 2020 marked a new high in the percentage of students scoring a 3 or better. 71.2% of the class of 2020 took at least one AP or UConn ECE course, and over 40% of the class of 2020 qualified for the seal of biliteracy on their diplomas, indicating proficiency in a second language. 99% of our students graduate, and the overwhelming majority go on to pursue a 4-year degree. A number of our graduates continue their athletic pursuits in college and play at D1, D2, and D3 institutions. Many of our graduates gain acceptance to some of the most competitive colleges in our country. Members of the class of 2020 are currently studying at institutions like Harvard, California Institute of Technology, Duke, Cornell, University of Chicago, Columbia, University of Pennsylvania, and Johns Hopkins, just to name a few. So we continue to have much to celebrate as we consider the accomplishments of our students. As we look forward, we plan to continue to add to those successes by addressing a range of district goals that are supported by this budget proposal. While we know many of our students achieve at high levels, we also know that many more can. As is evident in the SBA data I just shared with you, we have a significant achievement gap between our general education and special education students. We've articulated goals around narrowing the achievement gap. We continue to target improvements across the district in mathematics achievement. Work has been underway for some time, and we continue to refine our focus and our efforts. We remain concerned about the potential for learning loss and have introduced sharper diagnostic tools that provide clear data about students' levels of performance and potential learning gaps. This month, we launched a supplemental mathematics instructional program and look to continue that work in the coming school year. We also continue to plan to augment our high school course offerings and ensure that we're providing the curriculum experiences that will best prepare students for life after Wilton High School. Thinking forward, we also have plans to address a number of our larger systemic goals, including continuing our work at diversifying our staff, developing a portrait of the leader to accompany our portraits of the graduate and portrait of a teacher, address facility improvement planning, and address student social and emotional learning needs. As we do every year, we develop and adopt a set of assumptions to serve alongside our goals that help frame and guide budget development. Some of the key budget development assumptions guiding our work this year include an understanding that we'll be in a pandemic recovery mode, which means that while we'll still be experiencing some restrictions and implementing some mitigation strategies, we believe we'll be moving toward more typical operations. We're anticipating higher than projected student enrollment. I'll discuss this more in detail shortly, but the most recent enrollment projections did not account for families that withdrew to homeschool or private school as a result of the pandemic and may return. And then the third key assumption here, we may have additional costs resulting from the pandemic that are not accounted for in this budget. HVAC repairs or replacement, or costs associated with special education compensatory services are just two. So given our goals and given our assumptions and given our proposed staffing levels, the budget request for the 2021-2022 school year is $85,569,914.86. This represents a 3.92% increase over this current year's budget, or an additional $3,255,352. The overwhelming majority of budget dollars is dedicated to staffing our schools. Salaries represent 65.64%. Benefits and insurance represent another 13.81%, which totals 79.45 of the total operating proposal. Contracted services comprises 10.49%. Other purchase services, 3.72%. Supplies and digital resources, 2.36%, utilities, 1.93%, property services, 0.99%, liability insurance, 0.77%, and equipment is 0.29% of the total operating budget. In terms of dollars, salaries represent $56.1 million. Insurance and benefits is another $11.8 million. Contracted services, 8.9. Other purchase services, 3.1 million, supplies and resources, 2 million, utilities are about 1.6 million, property services, 847,000, liability insurance, about 657,000, and equipment, about 247,000. Salaries year over year are projected to increase about 3%. Within that is included contractual increases, as well as budgeting for several positions that were added as a result of the pandemic. We added a kindergarten teacher at the start of this year. We added a 5th grade teacher when we transitioned Cider Mill back to full in-person learning. We added 2 paraprofessionals to support students with special needs who moved in from out of state. One is at Miller Driscoll and the other at Cider Mill. In this current proposal, we're proposing to add a math interventionist at Cider Mill, and we've also added some dollars to the salary line to support an additional Miller Driscoll classroom teacher if we need it. But at this point, we're not planning for an additional section. You can also see contracted services has increased year over year about 3%. On this line is contained our bus contract, our legal fees. This is where we pay for officials for our games. We also house our technology lease on that line, and then the contracted services for special education. Property services is up fairly substantially year over year, but not necessarily up when you look back at the 2019 actuals. Within this line is the lease for Genesis, as well as the fee for the ice rink rentals, and then building repairs. Utilities are also up. The increase here is due to a projection related to natural gas and the amount of heating fuel we're expecting to use. Supplies and digital resources are up quite a bit year over year. These are general supplies, cleaning and maintenance supplies, our digital resources, as well as our testing and evaluation supplies. On the other purchase services line, this is where we find our dollars dedicated towards training and conferences, the tuition for our outplaced students at both public and private institutions, as well as our dues and membership fees. And then the last driver here, the equipment, that's where we find dollars dedicated to our technology equipment, any athletic equipment that we would be repairing and replacing, as well as musical equipment. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this next set of slides, but I wanted you to get a sense of the detail. This next set of slides highlights the summary of details by cost center. And what you'll note here is primarily the contracted cost increases of our staff. The FTE change at the bottom of this page at Miller Driscoll reflects the additional teacher we hired this current year and propose to keep. All of this information is in your budget books, and we'll go through each cost center in detail during next week's workshop. I just want to call out some themes. This slide captures the operating expenses for Miller Driscoll. You'll note the sharp increase on the line for natural gas. Chris Burney is anticipating a significant increase in that line across a number of the schools. He reports that part of the increase is reflected by the fact that we've been operating our HVAC system to maximize fresh airflow in the building, and thinking that we may need to continue to do this going forward. In the colder months, it takes more natural gas to heat the building when so much fresh air is being pumped in. I'd also call out on this page, the contracted services line looks like a substantial increase, but that's only a year over year change. That funding line is actually closer to pre-pandemic actuals. Cider Mills details tell a similar story. The salary line picks up the additional classroom teacher we hired this year, as well as proposes a math interventionist. You'll also note here at Cider Mill on the staffing lines, the reductions of 0.5 FTE each in PE, art, and music. It's important to state that these reductions are a result of enrollment decline. They do not represent any change or reduction to programming in any of those areas, art, music, or PE. With respect to Cider Mill's operating costs, you'll note again a sharp increase in natural gas. There's a modest increase in the training and conference line, similar modest increase to general supplies. Middlebrook's operating expenses I'd show there's no change in FTE. We added temporary staffing this year, and that staffing is not being continued for next year. Their operating expenses also show modest increases in several areas. Textbooks are up, training and conferences are up. We've proposed funds in the building repair line to address the bathrooms outside the auditorium, but we have not proposed funds to address phase 1 of the upgrade plan we developed and then tabled a year ago for the whole school. Jose Figueroa is currently working with Turner Construction to develop a more detailed picture of the facility needs, and we'll come back to the board to discuss how those needs may need to be addressed. This is also a conversation that we need to have both with the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance as we think about longer-term facility maintenance. Wilton High School's personnel costs are up 3.7% in total. The 0.5 FTE change doesn't reflect a true additional 0.5. For a number of years, we maintained a fitness trainer for our athletes who worked in the weight room. That position had been funded like an athletic coach and didn't show up in our FTE count. So in this proposed budget, Mr. McDougall is proposing to convert that position to a 0.5 athletic trainer, which is included in our FTE count. In terms of dollars to dollars, it's actually a wash and may actually represent some savings because we won't need to contract out for those additional athletic training hours. Because the high school staffs to the section, you will note some shifting across departments, but there's no substantial change in the total number of certified teachers requested. At the high school, other lines that are showing some increases are training and conferences, field and athletic trips, and textbooks as well. The special services budget also shows a modest increase. When you look at the total FTE, I just want to flag for you when you go through your budget books, it's important to look at the total personnel at the bottom of the second page, just to avoid some confusion here. Because we capture per pupil spending by both cost center and location, the pre-K staff is captured in both the Miller-Driscoll budget and the SPED budget. However, they're not duplicated. It's simply a function of reporting. So some of you, when you're going through that, you may know at the bottom of the first page, staffing of 14609. But you'll see on the second page, we less out the pre-K staff because that's picked up in the Miller-Driscoll budget. You can see here on the, if you look at the bottom of this is the second page of the special services summary sheet. So you'll see the correction there. And again, that's just a function of reporting. At Genesis, the increases on this line are driven by first contracted salary increases. We've added salary to that line because we'd like those staff to also work an 11th month to support the students in that program. And then the other major increase driving the Genesis budget is the increase in the rental fee for trackside. And that's gone up substantially because we've taken over use of the entire building. And so the lease has been updated to reflect that change. Last year, we were using just half the building. The next set of slides here are just the site summaries for the various central office departments. And you'll know when you do your detailed review that there's relatively little change on any of the lines. One of the most substantial changes comes in one of the latter slides, and that's the support services contracted service line. So that's Jose Figueroa's department, and we've added a couple of service contracts that have inflated the cost of that line. So, but if you scan the proposed budget line and the difference between them, relatively little change. You'll see it's the under operating expenses at the very bottom where we pick up the increased cost of some service contracts. The cost increase in transportation is really reflected by our contract with STA. Oops, excuse me. Within the technology budget, the decrease comes as a result in a decrease in the lease cost, and that was because we did some pre-purchasing this year. I will note here that we have been exceptionally well served by our technology and digital learning teams. Last March, when we made the transition to full remote, we had the infrastructure in place to do so. That is a result of multi-year improvement planning. This year, similarly, when we implemented the hybrid model, on the whole, the implementation was pretty smooth. And again, this is a result of the infrastructure improvements we've been making over the last 5 years. This is an area of the budget where we've seen tremendous return on our investment. And I would say similarly for our digital learning budget as well. You'll note here in the digital learning budget, it's actually showing a decrease for the 21-22 school year. And that's because we pared back on items like training, conferences, and supplies. But the work that Fran and Eric have done, as you know, and we've talked about throughout this year, has just been incredible in supporting our teachers and students in managing the multiple environments in which they have to work and teach our kids. And so just to summarize here, this is also a page taken from your budget books. It's the site summary. And as you read down each of the cost centers, you'll note again, the total proposal is $85,569,915 with a request for 574.09 staff. I want to take a minute and just talk about what those staffing changes are so we can better understand all the details. Budget to budget, we're looking at a proposed total FTE increase of 4.5. The staff that we added this current year, as I mentioned earlier, includes 2 classroom teachers, 1 at Miller Driscoll and the second at Cider Mill, 2 paraprofessionals, also 1 at Miller and the other at Cider Mill, that were hired to support 2 students that moved in from out of state, and then a 0.5 social worker that we hired back in December to support students at the high school. Thinking forward, the proposed new staff include a 1.0 math interventionist, and then the 0.5 athletic trainer that I noted is not really a dollar add, it's simply a shift. And then a paraprofessional for community steps to manage the projected increase of the numbers of students participating. Those FTE increases, as you know, as you'll note at the bottom of the slide, are offset by a 1.0 reduction of an executive secretary position in the support services department, and then 5s in art, PE, and music from Cider Mill that I mentioned previously. So a couple of things to know. We know that we have been experiencing a relatively modest enrollment decline. What you're looking at here, and I'll just say in general, enrollment this year is more challenging to forecast because of the disruption to enrollment caused by the pandemic. And so in this slide, we have 2 sets of projections from Ela Achievement. In the blue are the projections that she made back in the fall of 2019. And then the orange reflects her most current set of projections in 2020. And you can see in the most current set, what she's reflecting is all of the students who withdrew this year as a result of the pandemic, and she doesn't forecast for those students to return. So that's why you see the variance between the 2 sets of projections. Here, the numbers are broken out by school, and it's interesting because it really, when you look at each of the graphs, if you key in on the graph for Miller Driscoll, you see that's where the projection variance is most pronounced, and certainly that shows up in our data. And I'll talk a little bit more about how we're trying to manage the differences in the 2 sets of projections here. Also pronounced at Cider Mill, though not as great at Miller Driscoll, and then some slight variances at the high school and Middlebrook as well. So when we think about how we manage our forecast, as I said before, it is challenging. So we surveyed families back in November and have accounted for the families who indicated that they would be returning their students in our projections. To forecast, we are utilizing Ela Achievement's fall 2020 projections, but we're adding the responses from families who indicated their plans to return. So if you look towards the bottom of this slide and then the next 3 slides, you'll see the projected plus returning enrollment. And so at kindergarten, we're forecasting 215, Those kids are, as you know, new to our system, so we don't actually have any who are returning. In grade 1, those are our current kindergartners. We're projecting 241. It's Alan's projection plus 2 that indicated they'd be returning. And then for grade 2, 215. We had 10 families who indicated that they'd be returning. So to try to get as clear a picture as possible of the potential universe of students for any one grade level, we looked at our October 1 actuals and then compared them to Ellen's 2019 projections. We compared the differences with the number of withdrawals, and then just using kind of a simple cohort survival approach, we added the actuals and the withdrawals, and that provides us with a total number of possible students, at least the ones that we know about, on a particular grade level. We then took Ellen's 2020 projections and added them to the number of students that plan to return. And so we compare this number to the potential total, and we look to see how closely those numbers align. For kindergarten, we won't know actuals until the time of registration. Grade 1 presents the greatest variance between the potential number of students. So I just call your attention, if you see the set of numbers highlighted in green in the middle of the slide, looking at the number of withdrawals, looking at Ellen's 2019 projections, we're imagining that we could have as many as 258 students return. And so for that reason, we've added dollars to the salary line should we need to open an additional section. But it's an unknown, so we didn't commit to those plans yet. So we have the money, but we're not committing to the FTE. And we'll see how registration unfolds as we move later into the spring and summer. In terms of sections and class sizes, in this budget, we're proposing to retain current levels of classroom staffing. And as we think about pandemic recovery and the need to provide as much attention to students as possible, to me, it makes sense that we retain class sizes at the low end of our historic averages. So at Miller Driscoll, we're currently projecting average class sizes of 18 across each of the grades. At Cider Mill, you can see we're looking at a total projected enrollment of somewhere around 775 students, about 250 in each grades 3 and 4, and about 273 in grade 5. So our projected class sizes are 19 in grade 3, 19 in grade 4, and then 21 in grade 5. At Middlebrook, similarly, we're looking at a total student population somewhere just over 900. And so we're anticipating class sizes in that 19